Ferrari is looking to enter the 2023 season with a revenge mission, and in order for their mission to be successful, they need a fast and reliable car. From what we've been able to see from the Maranello team, it seems like they've managed to do exactly that. And parallel to those issues, they have also fixed the human problems as well. So, what are the new improvements that we'll see on the Ferrari 2023 car? What is the team's strategy for the upcoming season? And what are some of the biggest challenges that the team will face? Ferrari has faced a lot of issues in the previous season, and they hurt as much as they did because the team won 2 of the first 3 races, and Leclerc had a 46-point advantage compared to Verstappen. But their season was mostly haunted by factors that they couldn't control, such as reliability issues and human errors. Ferrari was mostly mocked on the grid for messing up the tactics in a variety of races. The first blunder started in Monaco, and the last one ended in Brazil, so overall we had a fiesta from Ferrari making themselves fools in the eyes of the fans. One of the races where the tension had boiled over was in Silverstone, where Leclerc and Binotto had been on non-speaking terms, and rumors have it that this was exactly the race where Ferrari had to think in another direction from Binotto. Little did they know, Vasseur wouldn't implement the tactic that Leclerc wants, and it seems like with Ferrari having a competitive car in 2023, the drivers are going to have a hectic battle between them when it comes to who will be the #1 driver on the team. But we'll get to that later in this video. For now, we have something else to talk about. Ferrari's 2022 car, more specifically the F175, was truly a masterwork of engineering in terms of aerodynamics because it was the closest car to Red Bull in terms of performance. At certain races, Ferrari was definitely the fastest car on the grid, and even though people don't seem to realize it, the Maranello team was the bouncing genius. This means that although they were porpoising heavily, like they did in Australia, they were much better than Red Bull, who weren't porpoising at all, and Mercedes, who were also bouncing like crazy. With this in mind, Ferrari has made some changes for the 2023 car, including the implementation of a thicker floor due to the prohibition of the flexing phenomenon. One of the changes that Ferrari will implement in order to battle the aerodynamic phenomenon is the lowered profile of the sides. The step between the vertical section and the floor side is now much more marked, and what this means is that a sort of channel would be created, which follows the double floor principle, which has been greatly implemented on the RB18, the most dominant car that has exited production from their fiercest rivals, Red Bull. The chassis, on the other hand, in its lower section on the sides of the cockpit and in the fuel tank area, will be deeply different from its predecessor. According to rumors, a precise correspondence happens only at the pickup points of the engine. The work in evolving the location of internal mechanics then involved a total makeover of the gearbox to allow the adoption of the diffuser, characterized by a 10mm elevation of its junction with respect to the Venturi channels. The rear suspension has been relocated in the 2023 Challenger, while the front suspension has remained unchanged. The rear one would have a different location, mostly because of the elements that are located inside the gearbox. But this didn't seem to be too much of an issue for Ferrari, as in the middle of the season, we witnessed that they struggled a lot to keep up with Red Bull in terms of pure pace. Sure, they had the fastest car in a couple of races, but that was far from enough to be a championship-winning team yet again. That is why they managed to build an engine that will be, according to Gunther Steiner, with rumors initially saying that the engine has 30 horsepower more compared to the 2022 version. This has been denied by Vasseur, as the Frenchman has laughed off these claims and said that, in terms of numbers, there is nothing I can say. But what he's very happy with is the progress of the car. Ferrari has entered a tough transition process with Binotto leaving the team and putting Vasseur in his place, which eventually means that Vasseur will have his hands full of work. Vasseur is grateful to Binotto in this regard, as the Swiss have successfully transferred the leading role, which the former Alfa Romeo principal will have to use to the fullest from the start, as there is no room for error. So what has Ferrari fixed further? Another thing that Ferrari managed to tackle successfully is the weight of the car, and recent reports say that the Maranello team has built a car that is lighter by 2 to 3 kilograms compared to the F175, which was the 2022 car. People often misunderstand how heavy this is, mostly because they don't realize that the increased ride heights and the inhibited flexing phenomenon mean that the car will have a thicker floor, and that translates to the weight of the car being increased. Ferrari has struggled with the weight of the car for the 2022 season, and now reports say that the new car, the one that has been granted the name SF23, is a bit different compared to what we've been used to seeing up until this point from the Maranello team. Yet, there seems to be an issue in Ferrari that needs to be solved sooner rather than later, and that's the preference of Vasseur when it comes to the number 1 and number 2 drivers on the grid. Earlier this season, when Vasseur was rumored to be the successor to Binotto, he said that every successful team in Formula One has had a designated number 1 and number 2 driver. This eventually meant bad news for Sainz, because we know that Vasseur worked previously with Leclerc and Alfa Romeo, and the Monegasque was practically the number 1 reason why Vasseur was chosen to be the replacement for Binotto. But now, when talking about this matter, Binotto had a very controversial stance, one that the Leclerc fans won't like a single bit, as he said, "The target of the team is to win, with Ferrari and for Ferrari. This is the policy of the team. I already spoke with the drivers about this. It's crystal clear that we'll give them exactly the same treatment, and we'll support both of them in the same way. For sure, if at one stage during the season one is in a much better place to fight for the championship, we'll have to take action. But it's not that one will be the number 1 from the beginning of the season. This can't work because you never know what will happen, and we have to do the best for the team, not for the drivers." Obviously, Leclerc and his fans seem to forget that Vasseur also worked with Sainz back in 2017 at Renault, which is why he has a lot of praise for the Spaniard. He even went to the extent of saying that when he wanted to collaborate with Sainz after he left Renault, he understood that the only way to accomplish this was to join the team that Sainz currently races for. That is definitely one of the heavier reasons why Vasseur chose Ferrari, and not Leclerc himself. But the team needs to be extremely careful, because if Leclerc isn't given the number 1 position, or he doesn't earn it by outperforming Sainz, Ferrari is in a heavy situation of losing the Monegasque from 2025 onward. As of now, Leclerc's contract expires in 2024, and Vasseur said that it's not a high priority for the team to work on an extension now. He is likely to test out Leclerc against Sainz and see whether he has the championship mentality in himself, because he was also outperformed by Sainz back in 2021 when the Spaniard debuted with Ferrari. One team that would be very happy to see this scenario happen is Mercedes, as Hamilton is expected to sign an extension for 2 more years and then finally think about retirement. If there is one driver that would be designated as the perfect replacement for him, that would be Leclerc. But we cannot make suggestions until we see how the 2023 season unfolds, one that the Leclerc fans thought would be much easier for their idol than it originally seems now. With that being said, Ferrari has a very interesting period ahead of them, and while their car seems to be competitive enough to tackle the RB19, there isn't a guarantee that everything will go well with their drivers. What do you think will happen next with Ferrari in 2023? Let us know in the comments below.